Man, what is it with Nintendo fanboys, Nintendrones, that makes them defend Nintendo even when Nintendo is clearly doing something that they shouldn't be doing? And we're going to be looking at that exact type of individual today. We're looking at a Nintendo fanboy that is celebrating Nintendo copyright striking Garry's Mod content. Obviously, people like to mod different things into Garry's Mod, those being characters from other games, places from other games, just tons of stuff from other games. And of course, some of those games are going to be Nintendo games. Nintendo isn't too happy about this, and they're actually copyright striking Garry's Mod. And absolutely everybody's favorite Nintendo fanboy, Harmon Smith, is celebrating. The video is titled Nintendo Takes Down Garry's Mod, PC Emulation is Finished, which neither of those things are true. First of all, they're not taking down Garry's Mod, they're taking down mods in Garry's Mod of, like, Nintendo characters and stuff. Second of all, this literally has nothing to do with emulation. Nothing is being emulated here with Garry's Mod. And just to throw a little bit more salt in the wound, if you're one of the people on my channel who hates emulation, I know quite a few watch, I'm gonna use some emulated Minecraft gameplay. Eat a dick. Anyway, let's get straight into the video.
After 20 years of illicitly using Nintendo products on their stupid application, Garry's Mod has been forced to remove each and every piece of Nintendo property on it.
It's not Garry's Mod putting these Nintendo places, characters, mods, whatever, into their game. It's people. Like, the entire point of Garry's Mod is people making mods. It's just users that put all this Nintendo stuff into Garry's Mod, and they put it on the workshop so you can download it.
Oof. Massive L for the company, massive L for modders, PC gamers, steampunks, massive L for basically everyone, because this demonstrates something I've been telling PC gamers for a while now. I think this has been very evident, especially after, like, Yuzu being taken down the way it was, and seeing how people have reacted to that, seeing, like, the Yuzu competitors, like the copycats being taken down. I've been saying this for a while, but it does not matter how long people can get away with exploiting Nintendo's brand.
How is it exploiting Nintendo's brand for somebody to mod their favorite Nintendo character into a game like Garry's Mod? That is complete bullshit. Just because somebody mods in Luigi into Garry's Mod to make them as like a playable character or whatever, or to have them there as a model, that doesn't make them exploiting Nintendo. If anything, it kinda helps their brand, because let's say you see a Mario location modded into Garry's Mod, that might remind you, oh yeah, I forgot about Nintendo games, I might go buy a Nintendo game and play it, or I might go play a Nintendo game. Also, I find it hilarious that Nintendo are like the only people who do this type of shit. Also, the Pokemon Company do this as well. They recently struck down a 7-year-old COD Zombies video because it had Pokemon models in it. Like, what the fuck?
Because eventually they're gonna come after you, and they're gonna shut the entire thing down. Now, you can cope and you can seethe. You can try and say, like, oh, but I'll just download another emulator.
Yeah, that's something called the Streisand effect. Obviously, Nintendo doesn't want people emulating, so what did I do when they started shutting down Yuzu and its competitors? I went ahead and I started emulating Nintendo Switch games more.
But I'll just buy the next Pal World clone.
I thought I remember you saying a long time ago that Pal World would soon be forgotten, but here you are months later still talking about it. Seems like it hasn't been forgotten.
Like, I'll just support Digimon. Like, you can cry and seethe and cope and moan and bitch and cry as much as you want, but the reality is, these kinds of derivative brands that blatantly rip off Nintendo's property are doomed to failure. No matter how long it takes to go through the court system, right? So that does include emulation, that does include Pal World, that does include, things like Garry's Mod, which utilize Nintendo assets, right?
Garry's Mod itself does not utilize Nintendo assets, it is mods for the game that utilize Nintendo assets, just like how there's Call of Duty mods out there that, like, might put you in a Mario location for a zombies map or something like that. Call of Duty itself does not have Nintendo assets, but that Call of Duty mod does.
I'm curious at what point Nintendo is going to be comfortable going after Apple, because there's all this talk about like, oh, Apple is allowing an emulator on the iPhone store. Well, that's not allowed, right?
If emulation is so illegal, then why does Nintendo use it in their online service that sucks ass?
So Nintendo does have a right to take them down.
They can take some down. That's why takedowns like Yuzu were successful, but takedowns like Dolphin weren't. I'm not really sure as to the reason why it was successful with Yuzu, but it wasn't with Dolphin. But you can't take every emulator down, and that is just proof that you can't, because obviously they failed with Dolphin. And something being legal and something being moral isn't the same thing. If it was legal to, I don't know, go kill people, it still wouldn't make it morally okay to do.
Right? It's going to happen eventually at some point through some method, but like the reality is you're not going to have emulations on iPhone, right? You're not going to have your Nintendo games on the iPhone, just like you're never going to have them on the PC.
We're never going to get Nintendo games on PC. How come I'm playing a Nintendo game on PC in the background then? And before you Nintendo fanboys come in my comments and cope and cry and bitch, I own this game, so cry harder. I'll do what I want with it.
Or the Xbox or the PlayStation brand, right? It is becoming more and more clear that Nintendo is cracking down on this kind of thing, and people don't know how to cope with it, because for the past 10 years, that's been the go-to justification to write off Nintendo games. Like, oh, I'll just emulate that, but can you, though?
I think the background gameplay I have right now may answer that question for you. Yes, I can. It is my game that I went out and paid for with my money, and I will do as I please with it.
Like, that's the reality. Like, can you? Like, again, like, if you emulate the Thousand Year Door, right, if you pirate that sucker, right, you're telling Nintendo that, like, oh, people don't want to pay for classic Paper Mario games, and the community isn't going to like that. You're not going to get more of it, right? Like, why exactly would you ever do that? Like,
why would I ever do that? Well, because I own a copy of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and I can play that copy on my PC without having to pay for an overpriced Switch port. That's why I'd do that. Why would I pay for an overpriced Switch port of a GameCube game when I own the GameCube version and I can play that GameCube version on my PC or my Steam Deck?
That doesn't make any sense. The reality is, PC gamers are desperately trying to downplay Nintendo.
Nobody is trying to downplay Nintendo. We are simply upset that they are going and taking down fan-made mods on completely different games that doesn't harm Nintendo's bottom line. And we're upset that they're trying to get rid of emulation for Nintendo games, because Nintendo games on their own console only run in like 20 to 30 FPS, and it's 2024, not fucking 2004.
Through any methods imaginable, right? That includes hyping up mobile games, hyping up no-name brands like Shift Up and Pocket Pair,
Of course he brings up Pocket Pair, which are the people who developed Pal World. Like, dude, you said Pal World would be forgotten, but you're still talking about it. Like, which one is it, bro?
Pretending that what Pal World did wasn't plagiarism.
Pal World didn't plagiarize anything. It was very similar in its creature design to Pokemon, but it did not plagiarize from Pokemon. And if Pal World plagiarized Pokemon, then what did Pokemon do to Dragon Quest? I know you Nintendo fanboys hate this image.
Right? Like, it's always been bad. I've talked at length about how, like, people make up that myth about how, like, the N64 had a weird controller.
It did have a weird controller. It had great games. Some of my favorite games of all time are on the Nintendo 64, but that didn't change the fact that the controller sucked. I mean, that's another great thing about emulation. You can use whatever controller you want. You can use, like, fucking Donkey Kong barrels to play emulated games if you want.
It had no games, or like it was hard for third parties to code for, or something, right? Like, I've talked at length about all of that, right? But like, the reality is, all of those excuses are getting brushed aside, and gamers cannot like come up with more, cannot invent new excuses to downplay Nintendo consoles.
In these instances of Garry's Mod and emulation, it's not people trying to downplay Nintendo. In emulation's case, people don't want to play games in 20 to 30 FPS, which is understandable. And in Garry's Mod's case, people are upset that Nintendo is taking down fan-made, like, mods and stuff that hurts Nintendo in no way at all.
right? Like, the narrative has always been like, well, I don't want a Nintendo console, so I'll just play my Nintendo game somewhere else, but there's not gonna be anywhere to play those games.
Well, I mean, I can always play it on my PC. No matter how many times they try to take down emulators and stuff like that, Internet Archives exist, backups exist, forks exist, and people will find ways to emulate your games.
Like, already, there's not.
There isn't anywhere to play emulated Nintendo games? Then explain the background gameplay. Explain how I'm playing Splatoon 2, a Nintendo exclusive game, on my PC.
Like, people are desperately trying to downplay it, right? But the reality is, you're simply not going to get...
Can I just say that this guy says the reality is over and over and over and over in his videos to the point where it's actually getting annoying?
Nintendo emulation legally on any forms of hardware. So that stuff is going to get cracked down on. You know, fan games are getting cracked down on. You know, assets and tools being used. All Nintendo needs to do is expand to the point where they can just take down that stuff one after the other.
Taking down fan games is a huge cock move. I know Rockstar likes to do it as well. Fuck you, Rockstar, for that. But yeah, taking down fan games, like, those people are making fan games and they're not even collecting money in it, in a lot of cases. And you go and take that down? Why not hire them to work for you instead?
You know, again, they're expanding. They're getting more and more brutal about this, right? It's not something you're going to be able to get away with for very much longer, right? The reality is you will never ever be able to destroy Nintendo, and it's very, very exciting to see.
I want to just point out that this Nintendo fanboy is literally excited that Nintendo is taking down fan projects and fan mods and stuff. Like, that is some, like, sad behavior. And that pretty much brings us to the end of this video. I want to say one final thing. If you're celebrating Nintendo taking down fan content, you're a moron. Anyway, peace.